Lying in bed, tired and sweaty because it's so hot, I think about my name. It's so mundane. Kurt Smith. Why couldn't my parents have named me something interesting like Liam or Alcott or Barkley? I guess my first name isn't that bad because I share it with one of my idols, Kurt Cobain. But my last name, come on. If you looked me up on the internet, the only result that you'd get, that's actually me, is one art exhibit posting from a show I was in when I was still a painting major at Cooper Union 3 years ago. Pathetic. I live alone in the East Village in that studio apartment you picture when you fantasize being a fledgling novelist and living in a small, dimly lit room, drinking scotch in the evenings, reflecting on what you've written that day. My third floor walk-up has an iron-stained bathtub, a kitchen sink, an old desk, and a single bed in the same small room. Out the three windows, you can see two identical four-story red buildings across the street. Inside, my banged-up wooden door has six different locks lining its edge, even though the door to the building also locks. I guess they're left over from the 70s when this neighborhood was scary or cool, depending on who you talk to. The locks on my door are just to keep out the creepy neighbors like Jim, the fat guy who basically never leaves and randomly screams nonsense words in the middle of the night. These locks can't keep out the profound emptiness of the human soul, though. I'd know. Ugh. All I own are several hundred yellow paperback books, an old iPod, first generation, a school teacher desk, a bed with sheets I wash twice a year, a thrift store table that wobbles, a couple of moth-eaten second-hand flannel blankets, a shitty bicycle, a partially ripped poster of the original cover of Catcher in the Rye, and a framed 11 by 14-inch photograph of a skinny, beautiful, dark-haired kid with caramel-colored eyes. I don't know who he is. I found the photo in a thrift store, but I imagine that he's my all-time favorite literary character come to life, a distant boy named Calhoun, a junkie, from my all-time favorite novel, American Days, by Colin Senerty. I imagine Calhoun to be a much cooler and more delicate version of this asshole kid Vaslov, who lives one floor below me and always wears a tracksuit jacket that says Wigger across the front, the WIG on one side of the zipper and the GER on the other side. I moved to New York for art school when I was 18, just out of high school in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. My parents were alcoholics, but not that bad. They didn't hit me or fall down drunk on the front lawn. My dad was an engineer for a military subcontractor, and my mom was a media person for the Air Force. My dad loved his Audi hatchback and drove around the empty Kmart parking lot at night like he was a race car driver. He did donuts when it snowed, spinning around and around, barely missing the streetlight posts. My mom smoked a lot of cigarettes and got mean when she drank. When I turned vegetarian at 15, my dad got high and mighty and told me that vegetables felt pain too. I rolled my eyes and he dropped his bottle of scotch and blamed it on me. It shattered on the kitchen floor. My mom couldn't be bothered to clean it up. She just ashed her menthol cigarette in the sink as she watched him cut his hand on a shard of boozy glass. The blood stained the wood floor. I'm sure the blotch has been scrubbed away, but I'll never see it again because my parents are divorced and don't live there anymore. And even if they did, I wouldn't want to go back to that house anyway. I don't have any fond memories of my childhood like most people do. I hardly ever left the basement of that big house where I hung out with my two best friends, Sven, a skinny Swedish kid with skin the color of banana pudding who moved to Ohio for his dad's job, and Steve, who was constantly pushing his long hair from his eyes and strategically pushing it back over his eyes with the same stroke of his hand. I don't know why, but both Steve and Sven were unpopular at school. I thought it was crazy that no one liked them because they were perfect, and they were contemporary, meaning they had little to no relationships with their families. I guess they're why I have an embarrassingly and seemingly inexhaustible fetish involving skateboarders. Like even if there's a kid sitting behind a skateboard sitting behind a kid, I come faster. It's really stupid. There in the basement, we'd smoke pot, drink vast amounts of Robitussin DM, and sometimes jack off sitting around the big sectional sofa while watching something mindless on television like QVC. We didn't have porn or we would have watched that. We were always shirtless down there. It was one of our traditions. Probably because it was the same temperature in that basement no matter what the season, and there were no windows to let the natural light in. So being in the basement made days and nights blend together until the weeks became months, and then it was time to graduate from high school, and we'd successfully avoided most of the assholes we went to school with. We got pretty creative down there. We formed an art collective called the Smoker Fox Club, which involved sitting around a baseball hat with a fox on it, smoking pot, and eating large amounts of cheese. We painted together. We called the paintings triplets, and they were good. I went on to get a full scholarship for painting at Cooper Union, so my parents sort of had to pay for my New York apartment since they were getting a free pass on tuition. They were thrilled to see me leave, I'm sure. In my painting classes, I developed a style, realism mixed with impressionism, and made paintings of teenage boys' bedrooms, with each object inside totally carefully drawn, but never a person in sight. I painted my parents' old basement a lot too, the one where I spent all my spare time in high school. The pieces took weeks to get right, and I would usually feel like I was losing my mind while I was working on them. I stopped drawing and painting after college, mostly because I couldn't afford the paint and I had no space. Also, I didn't know how to go out and network and make small talk with a bunch of lame people at a bunch of pretentious parties that I was supposed to attend if I was ever going to be a well-known artist in New York. It's like you have to turn into a little one-man business to become successful, and I can't do it. The work's not enough, unless you're lucky to have a friend help you out, and I never did. I still don't know what I'm supposed to say when people ask why I gave up painting. It sort of gave me up. Was I supposed to just keep slaving away by myself? Was I supposed to act like I was on to something important when I knew I wasn't? Instead of painting, I bought an old green bike on Craigslist and rode around and looked at things, so at least I could make something cool looking in my imagination. I was into this whole physical is more real than conceptual phase. Like I thought I should start working out and getting some muscles and stop being such a whiny, creative little fuck. It lasted about one weekend. I'm too lazy. But I still love to ride my bike. It makes me forget about my worries. My parents stopped paying my rent 3 years ago, right after I graduated. My bike now has a flat tire, so I'm stuck at home a lot. I write. I write about the subway system. It's totally fascinating to me, even though it's slow and dirty and has the charm of a Soviet work camp. When I'm down there, I lean over the tracks and peer down the tunnels trying to spot the signals and the track changes. I even love service advisories and the signs posted that tell you what trains aren't working the signs that tell you which trains aren't working properly or which ones are skipping stations or temporarily running express. I spend most of my day trying to work on whatever novel I'm writing at the time. In reality, what this amounts to is the beginning of a bunch of novels, 6, each one over a little over 100 pages, and each one stopped, cut off, abandoned, printed out, and stacked in the deep bottom drawer of my desk, the drawer I never open. The characters are frozen, some mid-sentence, one eating spaghetti for all time, one riding his bike down Ludlow Street on his way to go drink beer for the rest of his life, one coming for eternity, one considering killing himself until the end of time, one forever crying, that tear on his cheek, it might not ever move again.